Welcome everyone to this week's video. We're the Dimitrov-Boulay piano duo. My name is Dimitri Dimitrov.
My name is Elvira Boulay.
And today, in today's video, we are going to talk to you about learning piano pieces by heart. You can play piano pieces from the score. You put the score on the piano, you read and you play, but you can also learn your pieces by heart. That means by memory. You don't have to look anymore at the score. Now, why is that important? One of the reasons that learning pieces by heart is good for you is because, very simply, you train your memory. Not only that, it feels very comfortable when you feel in the mood for a specific piece that you'd already learned to sit behind the piano, not look where your score is, and simply play it. Well, this is the fun part, the pleasant part, why you would want to learn your pieces, your piano pieces by heart. But there is also a much more useful, much more practical reason as to why it would be good for you to learn your pieces by heart. And we see this with Elvira in our teaching practice. When you play very simple pieces, it is possible to look at the score and look at your hands while you're playing. But I'm sure many of you know that once you start playing pieces that are a little bit faster, that are a little bit more complex, it becomes very difficult to follow simultaneously two different things. Looking at the sheet music while you're playing and at the same time following your fingers on the keyboard. And so, with more complicated pieces, it would be a wonderful tool to have in your arsenal to just be able to memorize, if not the complete piece, at least difficult parts of the piece, so you don't have to constantly shift your focus from the sheet music to the keyboard.
I also feel that when I play pieces by heart, it's much easier for me to get involved into the music. The question of how to learn a piece by heart is actually one of the most asked questions by students. But it is a very difficult question actually for teachers to answer, and that's because everybody's memory works different. And everybody has strong or weak points. Like, for example, some people have great ears, and they shouldn't learn a piece by heart analytically. Some people have a great understanding of how music is structured. They shouldn't learn a piece by heart by ear. So it also depends on what are your strengths. But in this video, we give you 3 general tips that are sure to help you learn your piece by heart.
And because we get asked this question so often, how do I learn pieces by heart, we thought we'd make a short video for you with 3 different steps, 3 different things you can think about while you're learning your pieces. Now, bear in mind that these are only 3 different little tips that you can use. That doesn't mean that that's the only way to learn piano pieces by heart. Like Elvira mentioned, there are different people, and so there will be many different ways that you can study piano pieces, but let's go with our 3 tips for today.
Before we begin, make sure that you actually know the piece that you want to learn by heart, that you know it well. It's that you didn't just start learning it. You know it well before you're prepared to learn it by heart. Now let's move to our first tip, which is pattern recognition. Our first tip is about pattern recognition, and there's a lot of patterns in music in general, so I could be speaking about a lot of different patterns, and you can definitely experiment with that. But today I want to talk to you about visual patterns. For me, this is a great help in learning a piece by heart, and I wanted to demonstrate this for you with the piece that I'm actually learning by heart at the moment. And I'm not learning the whole piece, like Dimitar said. Sometimes it's just about learning a tricky passage by heart, which for me is just too challenging or too complex, let's say, to look at the score and to look at my hands because I have some jumps. So it's much easier for me to simply learn this passage by heart. So while I was doing that, I actually realized that there's a lot of pattern recognition going on, how it looks on the keyboard, and I just wanted to share that with you. So the first pattern would be that you jump from black key to black key. That's the first pattern that I remember. I remember not only that I jump from black key to black key, but I also simply remember how it looks. So what it looks like. That for me forms some kind of pattern on the keyboard. Then I remember have to go down, simply have to go down. And then I have to remember that how it looks on the keyboard. I simply remember what it looks like. So visually, I learn it by heart by remembering just what movements I make and what pattern that makes on the keyboard. I call it a pattern, you might call it something else, but simply remembering what it looks like visually on the keyboard to do that. That is a great tool to use to learn a piece by heart. So try to not only apply this tip, but also try to make it your own. Like for me, I see a certain pattern on the keyboard, But like I said in the beginning, everybody's brain works differently. Just remember that your visual memory, remembering how something looks, is a big part of learning something by heart, and feel free to experiment with that. Now, if you liked the video so far, please give it a thumbs up. That will help us out very much. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel so that you are informed every time that we upload a new video. Now let's move on to the second tip.
The second tool you can use while you're learning your pieces by heart is your ears. It's always good to train your ears. Yes, the pattern, what just Elvira mentioned, is also a great thing to do. Your ears is absolutely also very, very important, because when you play piano pieces, you use different skills, you use different senses. And so your ears are very important. I chose to give you an example with a very famous piece because that, I think, is the easiest. Everybody knows the piece. It's the Moonlight Sonata, the first movement. And I thought that would be a great example because you can immediately recognize the piece and understand what I mean with this tip. Now, let's see, how do you use your ears when you're practicing a piece? We said in the beginning you have to be familiar with the piece. So you already practiced for quite a while. You know how this sounds. But let's say, imagine that in the second bar, you're trying to learn by heart and you forget your left hand, and something like this happens. You know this doesn't sound right. You know very well that you want this sound. Then what you're going to do is, instead of looking at the score and looking for the note, or randomly starting to look for the notes in the left hand, what you're going to do is you're just going to ask yourself calmly and peacefully, what could the next note be? So start again from the bar before where you made the mistake. And now, if you make this mistake, don't start randomly very quickly looking for the notes, but what you're going to do is, do I need to go, you need to ask yourself the question, do I need to go higher or lower? What's wrong with my note? And then you can try this. Okay, that sounds wrong. Then you might think, okay, maybe it's higher because you didn't train your ears yet, you don't know. Oh, but that sounds like the beginning. If I go a little higher in the left hand, it sounds like I'm back to the beginning of the piece. So why don't you try then a half note lower? And that could sound like the right note, and it is the right note. In this way, you're going to train your ear to recognize what's the right sound. So you're looking for the note, but not randomly. Yes, of course, you might find the wrong note a few times, but what I mean is don't look for it too quickly and just playing the different notes all the time, mistakes, and not even realizing what you're doing. Do it very peacefully, search for the notes. Yes, again, it's a random search because you didn't train your ears yet. You don't know if it's higher or if it's lower. Peacefully, calmly look for the note, recognize when it is the right note, try to recognize when it is the right note, and when you recognize that you have the right note, look at the bar, make the connection in the score where that note is, which bar it is. That helps you learn the piece as well, and then see if you're right. For example, in this case, I was playing C natural, but the note was B, so I needed to go half a note lower. Then I check in the score, double check, just to be sure that you have the right note, be satisfied that you recognized it with your ear, continue further. This can happen in the right hand, it can happen in the left hand, but again, start with simple pieces. I show you with this. I don't know what your level is. Start with simple pieces. Try to recognize notes, and you will notice with time that your ears will start recognizing the notes easier and easier. Training your ears this way for me represents something like somebody asks me a question. How can I do this and this with the piano? The best answer I can give is not give the answer straight away, but to make this person think himself or herself what the answer could be, and then I help finding that answer. The same is with studying pieces by heart. You might not know what the note is, and looking immediately at the score can give you the answer, but you're not training anything. And if you first try and force yourself to find the answer yourself without the book giving it to you, you train your ears, then you confirm with your teacher or with the book, and then you achieved a very important thing. You learn the note, but you also found the answer yourself. Enough with the second tip, let's move on to our last and third advice for today.
Now the first and the second tip are great tools to start learning your piece by heart. But this last tip will make sure that when you play by heart, it's more stable and that you avoid memory slips. It's actually very simple but very effective. Now when we learn by heart, we always learn by heart, well actually standard, right? What you would do is learn both hands together by heart. That creates a small problem, however. Very often we're not realizing that our hands are actually not independent in this way. So that means that you only know your left hand if you're playing your right hand. I mean, try it once. Try playing only your left hand by heart and see how far you get. And I'm saying left hand because left hand is often the accompaniment. So left hand would be very often less independent than the right hand. Of course, if the melody is reversed, if your melody happens to be in the left hand and accompaniment in the right hand, what I'm saying is also reversed. But since the right hand in most cases is the melody, I give this example. So I think that when, for example, you have a memory slip on stage, this sometimes happens because if something goes wrong in your right hand, you make a wrong note or something, because your left hand is not independent from your right hand, you also forget it. And that's when a memory slip can happen. And the way to avoid that is simply by learning both hands separately by heart. It's actually quite fun. So for example, I'm taking the same piece because I am studying it by heart at the moment. I don't know it yet completely. And I know that I know the first 2 bars of the left hand by heart. Why? Because it's exactly the same as the right hand. They both play the same notes. So that's easy. Where the bigger problem comes actually is in the 3rd bar because my left hand has only chords. And I don't know those by heart yet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna study those 2 bars separately using pattern recognition. So I'm gonna remember what it looks like to me on the keyboard. And of course using my ears. For me, using my ears is one of the biggest tools in learning by heart. And if you find it too overwhelming to learn your left and right hand separately everywhere, because you're not a concert pianist after all, right? Then just learn the bars in which you are feeling most unstable. You can figure that out just by playing for a friend, for example, see what goes wrong, and in those bars, take the left and the right hand separately, learn them separately by heart, and you'll see it will help you greatly. Now let's get back to the video.
I hope that you enjoyed these 3 tips, and what I hope even more is that you would apply them, because we know with Elvira from practical experience that they work. These tips work, and if you apply them, you'll benefit greatly when learning your piano pieces. Now I wanted to finish the video with a very short message. Most of the people, most of our students, and not only our students, but we see people in general who play piano, want to skip steps. They want to start learning pieces that are too complex for them to learn. Our advice would be simply, when you start training your memory and memorizing piano pieces, start with simple pieces. Memorize 20, 30, 40 pieces, very simple pieces for you, in order to train your memory and prepare yourself for more complex and beautiful piano works. And that reminds me of a very interesting story I heard about a person who went to Mozart and asked him, can you please teach me, how can I write symphonies? And Mozart said to him something like, well, before you go and write symphonies, why don't you start with some minuets, some very simple, small pieces, and then we move up the ladder and you start writing more complex and better pieces. Well, that person got really disappointed by Mozart's answer and said, well, you didn't start with the most simple pieces, you already started with symphonies very, very early. Why would I start with such simple music? And Mozart's answer was absolutely brilliant. He said to him, well, when I started writing symphonies, I didn't ask anyone how to write them. And so my message to you is, if you have trouble memorizing complex pieces, simply start with very simple ones and you will definitely improve your memory and you will start being able to memorize more difficult music.
If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And you can also follow us on Instagram. We upload very regularly there as well.
For us, recording this video for you, as always, was a great pleasure. Thank you for being here and watching, and see you next time.